Hello everyone and welcome to episode 38 of the Layton Fitness podcast. Now in today's episode we're going to be discussing protein myths. I've got 4 protein myths I'm going to discuss with you today, and hopefully it's going to really help you because I personally think that these 4 myths are perpetuated within the fitness industry a lot, and hopefully you'll be able to realise perhaps some of the mistakes you're making and then you can adapt them. And with a lot of these myths, often if you're continuing to follow the status quo, it's not necessarily going to hurt your results, but it can just cause more stress. For example, one of the topics I'm discussing is post-workout nutrition, nutrient timing, and this can just make things much more stressful if you're under the false illusion you need to be timing it within X number of minutes or even seconds after your workout. So we'll discuss that shortly, but I really think this is going to help in terms of releasing some of them myths and just being able to have less stress while simultaneously also achieving your goals. The first topic I want to discuss is how much protein the body can digest per meal. There's a couple of things we need to discuss here, but ultimately the big misconception for whatever reason has been 30-40 grams of protein is being the limit to how much the body can digest per meal. It's just completely incorrect. Ultimately the body's just going to stretch out that digestion process. So for example, if you have 60-70 grams of protein per meal, it's just going to stretch out that digestion process. Now with that being said, I wouldn't take that comment out of context and just consume one protein meal during the day, because otherwise you're just going to have some stomach discomfort and things like that. However, the point I'm making is it doesn't necessarily have to be the 6, 7, 8 meals which have been perpetuated within the fitness industry. Within the context of fat loss, meal frequency isn't too much of an issue. Therefore, choose a meal frequency that suits your preference. With regards to muscle building, there's a little bit more research supporting a slightly higher meal frequency, but still not that particularly high. I would suggest within the context of muscle building, you have at least 3 protein meals throughout the day. So it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 5. I don't really see any need to have 6, 7, 8 meals, which is being perpetuated by the fitness industry for many, many years. Now, the final comment just comes down to personal preference. Once you hit that minimum 3 protein doses per day, the rest is just down to personal preference. If you want to have 4 meals, 5 meals, 6 meals, whatever. And as I discussed within the context of fat loss, it's more down to total macronutrient intake hit before the end of the day. Meal frequency isn't too much of an issue, but again, choose a meal frequency that suits your lifestyle and you can actually adhere to it, because adherence is arguably one of the most important factors for fat loss and muscle gain. The second point I want to discuss is protein timing in and around the workout. So pre and post workout nutrition, more post workout nutrition. Now you probably already have heard people suggesting you need to have a post workout meal within X number of minutes immediately after your training back. However, we need to look at this from a hierarchy of importance. So for example, we know that total macronutrients, so protein, carbohydrate and fat intake met by the end of the day is one of the most important factors, if not the most important factor. As such, this foundation needs to be in place first before you can look into timing your meals around your training bout. So for example, total protein intake is more important than timing insufficient protein. So for example, if your protein target is 200 grams and you meet that by the end of the day with example A, however example B has only 100 grams of protein, but he times it, his pre and post workout meal, quote unquote, perfectly around the session. Person A is going to achieve a greater outcome because they've achieved that hierarchy of importance first, hitting total macronutrient and calorie intake by the end of the day. So that gives you a more perspective on that hierarchy of importance. So that needs to be in place first. Second, we need to discuss the goal of the post-workout nutrition meal, and ultimately it's to hold protein breakdown and kickstart protein synthesis. With that being said, timing isn't as important as most people think, with the caveat we have a couple of things in place. One, we're actually meeting total macronutrient intake by the end of the day. Secondly, if you're consuming a pre-exercise meal 1 to 2 hours prior to the training bell, which most people will be, you need to realise that there's still going to be amino acids still within the bloodstream throughout the session and for several hours after the session. So again, this puts in perspective that need and urgency for that post-workout nutrition meal, with the caveat we're consuming total macronutrient intake by the end of the day and we've got a pre-exercise meal 1 to 2 hours prior to the training bell. Now with that being said, I still think it's worth being sensible and still sandwiching a pre-exercise meal within 3 hours prior to the training bell and within approximately 3 hours post-workout. But like I said, notice my recommendations are completely different to the 20-30 minutes you've been told by a lot of the magazines, a lot of the misinformation within the fitness industry. Now, I'll briefly discuss some carbohydrates. I've actually discussed this specific topic in more detail on episode 2 in the podcast, so go back and listen to that. But I just want to briefly discuss with regards to the second component, carbohydrates. Again, the urgency of this post-workout meal would depend on whether you're training again later in the same day. So for example, if you're a endurance trainer, training twice per day, timing of carbohydrates between session 1 and session 2, if it's within 8 hours, can be relatively important, whereas most of us are just weight training individuals, train once per day. Thus, carbohydrate timing and type is a secondary concern, just because glycogen resynthesis will take care of itself by default as long as total carbohydrates are met by the end of the day. If your next training session is 24 hours away, then glycogen resynthesis will take care of itself. I know people are going to discuss insulin, and the point I make here is protein is also very insulinogenic. Therefore, if you're consuming that pre-exercise meal 1 to 2 hours before the training, that and protein within that post-exercise meal, you're going to get insulin above fasting levels, which is all that's required. In addition to that, if you did have any carbohydrates within that post-workout meal, regardless of whether it's a simple or complex carbohydrate, again, insulin is going to be elevated well above fasting levels, which is all you need. So hopefully that makes sense, and that just puts things in perspective. We've discussed the hierarchy of importance, we've discussed timing and how it can be more important for an individual training twice per day compared to a weight training just training once per day. Next topic I want to discuss is casein protein. You've all heard within the industry that you quote unquote need to have casein prior to going to bed because it's a slower digesting protein. And yes, it is a slower digesting protein compared to other protein sources, but again, we need to actually look at whether this is actually important or not. So again, let's go back to that hierarchy of importance. Total macronutrients need to be consumed by the end of the day, and as such, splitting hairs between protein digestion really just isn't necessary, given the fact there's always going to be an overlap of nutrients being absorbed from previous meals. In addition to that, you need to realise you're constantly in a state of either muscle protein synthesis or muscle protein breakdown throughout the day, and it's more to do with that net difference over the course of the day, the week, the months, etc. So realise that you're always going to be in a case of muscle protein synthesis and a muscle protein breakdown. That's not necessarily a bad thing, that's a normal thing, and it's a case of the net difference between the two over a course of a period of time, whether you're gaining muscle or not. So stop splitting hairs about the minutiae and put things in perspective. Start putting the bigger blocks in place, the broader strokes, hitting total macronutrient intake first rather than worrying about protein digestion speeds. The final point I want to discuss is whey protein. There seems to be a misinterpretation that you can only consume this just once per day, and this is just complete nonsense. If you're pushed for time or you're on a budget and you can't afford to buy just whole foods, having whey protein more than once throughout the day can be a great tool to help meet that protein target. And I think there's a lot of people that almost feel guilty. They've had, I don't know, one protein shake already during the day that they feel bad having another one, and don't feel like this. Like I said, we need to make sure we hit that protein target first. Obviously, we want to have a variety of protein sources to, again, get a variety of amino acids and nutrients, but at the same time, don't feel bad just having your protein more than once per day, because we need to, again, hit that hierarchy first, i.e. protein intake by the end of the day. And Whey protein has a full array of essential amino acids. It's convenient, it's cost effective, and I'm yet to find a client that can just cope by eating whole food protein sources. You're all very busy people, and having tools available to you where you can have a shake to help meet that protein target. Obviously not just having this within every meal, but again, don't feel bad about having this more than once per day. So hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully you can apply these 4 different myths, or potentially negate some of the myths if you've been following these in the past, and hopefully it's going to really help you out. If you're still yet to download my free ebook, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, you go to James Layton, Layton fitness.co.uk, and you can download that immediately. You can also see all the rest of my podcasts on the website, in addition to iTunes. I've got over 100 videos on the website as well, lots more free content, and you can learn more about me and my services as well on the website as well. Okay, thank you very much, have a good day, take care.